I watched this.
All right, I think we're up now. All right, let's go and review some things we talked about last lesson. Now, I will forewarn those watching on YouTube, please don't judge too harshly. It is Monday, coming off a time change. And so if you're watching this, weeks later or something, and they seem a little tired or out of it, we will blame it on that. Okay, so everybody lost an hour of sleep a couple days ago, and our bodies are still resetting. So apologizing in advance if they seem a little sad, and if they just are awesome like their usual awesome selves, then you just know they're just that good. Okay, so if they're bad, cut them some slack. If they're awesome, we'll give them credit. But last lesson, we talked a little bit about business math. And it's good for two reasons. One, you might be business owners one day. If nothing else, you're going to work for a business one day, perhaps, and probably. And you need to know how that works, how business works. Also, just as a customer, it's good to understand how business works, because it helps you to understand why things work the way they do. How many of you, you would have had to stay up late for this, but watched the State of the Union address that President Biden gave. And one of the things he mentioned in there, he called on companies to bring their prices down or stop shrinking the product and making everything smaller and still charging the same money, you greedy companies. There's just one problem with that. Businesses exist to make money. They have to make money or they do not exist. And if they don't exist, we don't have jobs. They have to make money. Maybe let's get policies in order so that businesses can more efficiently make money. But anyway, businesses have to make money, and what do we call the money businesses make? There's a term for it. Also sounds like a biblical term of someone who used to preach judgment to the people of Israel, but that's spelled differently. What is it, the money that a business makes, Michael?
Gross profit.
Profit, P-R-O-F-I-T, okay, not P-R-O-P-H-E-T, but profit is the money that a business makes. Now, when a business makes money, the idea is this: they sell you something, or they at least sell you a service. Okay, so we mentioned we could actually sell a physical item. You have the little buzzy bee thing with you again. Or we could sell services, and I think Jalen was babysitting. Okay, services cost money. Product costs money. And the key is that if Luciana is selling her little buzzy bee critter, she has to sell it for more than it costs her. Any of you ever watched Shark Tank? If you ever watch Shark Tank, okay, entrepreneurs come in. Oftentimes they're selling products or a line of products, and they ask them, okay, how much does it cost you to make? And how much are you selling it for? How many have heard that question over and over again on Shark Tank? What are you selling it for? How much does it cost you to make? And usually, how many of you have heard the entrepreneurs say, I believe if I get a big enough investment, I can get my costs down? Why do they want to get costs down? Because the lower their costs, the lower they can sell the product at, right? And the cheaper the product, the more of it they sell, the richer they get. Okay, the more people they can employ, all that stuff, okay? So there's two key words, cost and price, or selling price. We have to understand the difference between those two words. Cost refers to how much who pays. Corey? When we talk about how much something costs in business, we're talking about who pays the cost. The customer or the business? No. The business pays cost. Who pays price? That's the customer. So you as the customer, you go to the store, what you're paying is the selling price. But it cost the business something to sell it to you in the first place, right? It cost them something to get that product. Even services, it costs something, right? It costs time, it costs energy, it might cost gasoline to get where you're going. It costs you because you're not doing something else, right? For instance, maybe you're in a business and maybe you have your own business and maybe Jalen decides one day she's going to be a professional babysitter. So, she's 32 years old, and what does she do? She's still babysitting because there's just good money to be made in it. And she says, well, I can make $10,000 a year babysitting. Okay, that sounds good unless you could be making $30,000 a year doing another job, right? In the same amount of time. So everything has a cost associated to it. The key is you've got to have selling price on a product or service be greater than cost. And if you were to subtract selling price minus cost, that would give you what type of profit, class?
Net profit.
Gross profit. Gross profit simply says this is how much it cost me, this is how much I'm selling it for, that therefore is my gross profit. Does that make sense? However, with her little buzzy bees, she says, oh, it cost me $5 to make buzzy bees, and I sell them for $8. We went to take the price up. I'm making a $3 gross profit. Wonderful. But there's other factors that have to be taken into account, right? She has to pay to ship the materials in. She has to pay the labor to assemble the Buzzy Bees. She has to pay the electric bill at the place where she's assembling Buzzy Bees. She has to pay rent on the facility where she's got the Buzzy Bees. And there's all kinds of little extra costs in there. What do we call all those little extra costs that aren't necessarily directly tied to that product, but they're there? Those hidden costs, we might call them. Bryson? Overhead. Overhead. So really, truly, gross profit ignores overhead. If we want to factor in the overhead, we would take the selling price minus the combined cost and overhead together. What did I call cost and overhead together? What was the term I used for it, Bryson? The true cost. This is the true cost of the product, right? When you factor in the overhead. And if I take the selling price minus the real costs that include everything, now we've got, class, what we call the net profit. It's like gross pay sounds good, but then the government takes some money, right? So what you end up with is really the net pay. Gross profit. I paid this much for it. I sold it for this much. Yay, I made money. Well, what about the overhead? One of the problems we worked in the last lesson, a guy goes to a yard sale or something, buys an old beat-up dresser for whatever, and he fixes, or maybe it was a desk or something, then he fixes it up. He polishes it, stains it, smooths out things, fixes it all up. Well, that cost him more money, didn't it? That wasn't the cost. The cost was what he paid at the yard sale. But he had extra costs in fixing stuff up. That's the overhead. That gives it a true cost, and we take how much he sold it for minus that. That's really how much he got to keep. That's his net profit. Do you understand how gross and net referring to pay and gross and net referring to profit are very similar? Questions on that? All right. However, bad times happen sometimes. And let's suppose Luciana makes 1,000 Buzzy Bees. She's expecting big time sales. And her videos on TikTok just don't go viral like she expected. And the Buzzy Bees, it's just not. Yeah. And so she sells like 200 of them for $8, but then she's got an extra 800 Buzzy Bees sitting in a warehouse that she's already paid the cost for, and they're just not selling. She's like, oh, I guess most people don't want to spend $8 on a Buzzy Bee. How much did you spend on the Buzzy Bee anyway? $10. $10 on a Buzzy Bee. I'm shortchanging your Buzzy Bees. Oh, I'm sorry about the Buzzy Bees. All right, so anyway, but she's like, people aren't willing to pay even $8. I was willing to pay 10. I like the Buzzy Bee. But apparently, you're just a unique individual, apparently, for the sake of this illustration at least. And so she's like, you know what? Right now, I am literally getting no money. It'd be better to sell them and get at least something back. And so maybe I can take the money I get back and we'll just, we'll call it a day. So she's like, you know what? Half off Buzzy Bees, $4. Please buy Buzzy Bees. And so at $4, people are like, oh, this is so cute. I'll buy it for my kid. And so they buy the Buzzy Bees. Well, she paid $5 for them. Plus whatever overhead, but we'll ignore the overhead for sake of the illustration because it makes the numbers hard. $5 for them, but she sells them for $4. So her cost, and maybe even we could add in overhead, whatever, is actually greater than her selling price. Well, class, she's not making a profit. She's now taking a loss. And loss, you take the cost and overhead together if it's there, and subtract the selling price. Loss comes out, you're losing money, $1 a Buzzy Bee. Now, some businesses actually do this on purpose. Maybe Luciana decides she's going to sell the first 100 Buzzy Bees for $4 just to get Buzzy Bees out there so other people will see them. And they'll, oh, that's so cute. Oh, I love your Buzzy Bee. Where did you get it? And then they'll talk about it. And then somebody else will go to buy it. But by now, the price is up to $8. But it doesn't matter because they don't know the other person got it for $4. And so now they're like, ooh, I'm all in on Buzzy Bee. I want a Buzzy Bee. $8 sounds great. You know what? $10 sounds great. And so she's able to raise the prices, but she sold the first few for cheap to drive up interest. We said that's actually a special strategy. When you sell something at a loss on purpose to attract new customers. What's that called? It's a blank strategy. Both words start with the letter L. Jalen?
Oh, I was going to say...
I'll go back and look it up. We've had a weekend since then. LL. Loss leader strategy. A loss leader strategy is where you're willing to take a loss up front. You lead with a loss for the purpose of driving up customers, and then you can sell things at a higher price. Or maybe she's got a whole line of other products that she sells as well. She's like, you know what? I'll sell the Buzzy Bees at a loss because that'll get people to my website where I'm selling all this cool stuff, or they'll come into my boutique and they'll see all the cool stuff I've got, and they'll pay full price for those things, but they came for the Buzzy Bees. Anyway, whatever the case might be there. If she is selling things at, let's just suppose her net profit comes out $3. Let's just say hard, fast, this includes the overhead and everything. $5 is what it costs her all in to make Buzzy Bees. She sells them at $8. So her net profit is $3 and her selling price is $8. I can turn that 3/8 into a percent, 37.5%. The percent of net profit divided by selling price is called what? We make a percent comparing the net profit to the selling price. Jalen?
Profit margin.
Profit margin. Profit margin, and again, those of you who watch Shark Tank know what are your margins? Or they'll hear, okay, what are you buying? What are you making it for? How much are you charging? Ooh, those are great margins, right? How many have heard that term? Those are great margins, okay? Margin refers to the percentage difference between what you're profiting off of something versus what you're selling it for. That's your profit margin. And generally in product sales, you want at least a 30% margin. I mean, more is great if you can get it. Like if you can make it for cheaper and people are still willing to pay, and you have a sustainable business that way, by all means. Now, what if though she's selling them for $4? Because it's a loss leader strategy, or the worser case scenario, right? She's just not selling her Buzzy Bees, and she's taking a $1 loss. Well, profit margin suggests you're making money, but if she's losing money, how could I show that that's a dollar lost, class? Make it negative. And so she'd have negative 25% profit margin. A negative profit margin shows that you have been losing money. There's a 25% loss, essentially, on every sale she makes. Does that make sense? 25% of what she makes is a loss, versus if she's able to sell them at full price, 37.5% of everything she sells is pure profit for her. That's referred to profit and loss margin. All of that covered in the last lesson. Some of that was in the homework, not all of it. Some of it will be in tonight's homework as well. For now, let's look at the homework, page 46. And the first part of the homework was just giving you practice finding percents. Practice finding percents. And you were allowed to use a calculator for all of this. Number one, you were asked to find 35 is what percent of 70? And what did you get for that, Luciana?
50%.
50%. You divide the first number, 35, by the bigger number, 70, and that gives you a decimal, and you convert that over to a percent. So on number two, 48 is what percent of 59? Michael?
80%.
We said round to the nearest tenth of a percent, not the nearest 10%. So I think you got 0.8135 blah, blah, blah. But if we want the nearest tenth of a percent, we'll say 81.3. It's a 5 after it. Remember, 5 or bigger, rounded up. 81.4% is what we should have had there. Number three, 630 is what percent of 580? What numbers do we divide on this one? Joel?
630 by 580.
There we go, 630 divided by 580. And go and plug that into your calculator real quick now. And let's see what you get for number three. And again, it's going to start out with a decimal, Joel. He was out sick last time.
108.6.
Good. 1.0862 blah, 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 but 108.6%. And you go over 100% because the number is actually bigger than the whole, right? The part, 630, is greater than the whole. What about number four? 90 is what percent of 120? Bryson? Okay, so go ahead and plug it in correctly now. 75%. And then $11.38 is what percent of $49.99? And we'll have Corey plug that in and give us his answer. And he was also out last time. Well, 22 point, give me one more place. 22 point,
76.
okay, but only one more place, so round that next number. 22.8%, there we go, because the 6 would bump the 7 up to an 8. 22.8% would be our answer there. Questions on finding percents. Just to put the part in first, then divide by the whole value next. All right, let's take a look at these next problems and read number 6 for us, if you would, Elaine.
Mr. Foster owns a sporting goods store. He bought inline skates for $57 per pair. Each pair sold for $120. What was his gross profit on each pair of skates?
All right, again, there's no mention of overhead here, so we don't need to worry about that. Gross profit just says, how much did he sell it for, minus how much was his cost, right? Selling price minus cost. And so on every pair of skates, what, Elaine, we get?
$63.
$63 gross profit. That's pretty good. Now again, he's got to pay employees. He's got to pay for the electricity. So he's got expenses, so he doesn't actually make $63 on every pair of skates he sells, and that'd be great business. But in theory, that's the gross profit. Number 7, read that for us, Joel, nice and loud.
Last June, Mr. Foster sold $150,000 in merchandise. His cost for the merchandise he sold was $73,000, and his overhead was $43,000. What was his net profit?
All right, so what do we get for this one, Joel? As he's typing it in, his sales were 150 grand, but it cost him 73 grand to get the stuff he sold, and he ended up paying $43,000 in overhead that month. So at the end of the month, his net profit was
$34,000.
$34,000. How many had 34,000? All right, any questions on how we arrive at that number? You take his cost, 73,000, plus his overhead, 43,000. You add that together first. That's 116,000. So it really cost him, his true cost was 116 grand. He sold that stuff for 150 grand. So we subtract selling minus his true cost, and that's where we get the 34,000. Does that make sense? All right, any other questions there? Look at number 8, and read number 8 for us, if you would, Griffin.
Mrs. Jenkins bought an old bookcase for $65. She bought sandpaper and varnish for $14 and worked to make the bookcase look great. She then sold the bookcase for $100. What was her true cost for the bookcase, cost plus overhead, and what was her net profit?
All right, so first of all, what was her overhead here, Griffin?
65.
No, 65 is what she paid for the bookcase. That's the cost. What's the overhead?
$14.
The $14, because the sandpaper and the varnish, when you first buy the bookcase, that's not that actual product, right? You're buying a bookcase, you're selling a bookcase. Anything extra that has to be spent to get things ready for sale is the overhead, right? She's not selling the sandpaper and varnish, right? She just needs that to make the bookcase look good. So we would say that the sandpaper varnish, the $14, that's overhead. Does that make sense what overhead would be there? So what's her real cost for the bookcase, Griffin? Might be able to do this in your head faster than on a calculator. I don't know.
$79.
$79. How many had 79 for the true cost of the bookcase? Again, technically at wherever she bought it, it was only 65, but really it cost her 79. So if she then turns around and sells it for 100, what's her net profit, Griffin?
$21.
$21. How many had a $21 net profit? Again, it looked like her gross profit was 35, but her net profit, her real profit, was 21. Then number 9, was that a question, or you were offering to read it?
I was asking.
Yeah.
Did I do something wrong if I had $21.10?
Somehow. Oh, you know what you saw? You saw 100.1 and thought it was $100.10. That 1 is actually part 1, and then there's a part 2.
Oh, okay.
That's all that was. All right. Yeah, so you just misread the problem there. All right, so number 9, read that for us, Michael.
If Mrs. Jenkins spent 3 hours working on the bookcase, how much did she make for each hour spent?
All right, so how much did she really profit from the previous problem class?
$21.
And if it took her 3 hours to work on the bookcase and get it ready between sanding and staining, varnishing, whatever, how much did she make per hour? Michael? To make this too hard now.
$7.
$7 an hour. That's actually lower than minimum wage. Y'all realize that? So is that a good use of time or a bad use of time? Strictly financially speaking, bad use of time. Because she would have been better off working at McDonald's for 3 hours. She would have made more money. Now, again, maybe she really enjoys fixing up old furniture. Maybe she doesn't want to go work at McDonald's. Maybe she doesn't really want to work for a boss. She kind of wants to do... Okay, well then certainly, right, that's the positive life choice. She did what was best for her. I'm just saying from a strictly financial business point of view, bad use of time because she's making less than minimum wage there. Okay, so if she's interested in making money, this isn't a good business making venture, right? This is not where she's going to make her money and make a living. Number 10, read that for us if you would, Jalen.
The grocer bought 527 cans of peaches for 82 cents per can. He sold the peaches for $1.48 per can. What was his gross profit?
All right, so we first of all need to figure out how much does he make on every single can, Jalen?
148.
Well, that's how much he sells it for, but his cost was 82. So what is his profit on each individual can? Again, you didn't necessarily have to do it this way, but this was the way I felt was probably easy. 66 cents a can. And then he sold how many cans?
527.
So how much was his gross profit on these canned peaches?
$348.82.
I got $347.82. Does anyone else have
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, 347. Okay, I was like, did I misread something? No, it is 347.82 then. Okay, all right. So how many had that for number 10? That's the gross profit. But again, canned peaches don't show up on their own, nor sell on their own. So number 11, Corey, read that for us.
The grocer spent $34 in shipping for the peaches and paid a worker $15 to spend 2 hours unloading them, shoveling some cans and stocking the rest in the back. What is his overhead?
All right, so now we got to take into account the overhead the grocer spends, and how much does he spend in overhead there, Corey? Might be able to do this in your head real quick. How much?
19.
Well, he spends 34 and then he spends another 15. Are we going to subtract those two numbers? No, we're going to add them together, aren't we, to get $49. How many $49 overhead? Okay, so his gross profit, what he felt like he made, was $347.82. But when you account for $49 in overhead, what was his net profit, Luciana? Decided to redo this one. And the gross profit didn't account for the overhead. So now that we account for it, his net profit is actually
$298.82.
good. We just take what his gross profit was and subtract the overhead off of that because we didn't account for it the first time. $298.82. How many had that for number 12? All right, especially those who weren't here last time, do we feel like the gross profit, net profit thing makes a little bit more sense? Questions on that? All right, turn over if you would to page 49. You're going to work a little bit more with that in the homework this evening. But for now, I want to kind of change gears here and talk about investment. Investment is this idea of you making money by doing nothing, but maybe taking a little bit of risk. Okay, investment is, I think Luciana's Buzzy Bee company is going to make big bucks, and I want to get in on this, kind of like in Shark Tank. And so I said, you, Luciana, I will give you $200 if you give me a 30% stake in your Buzzy Bee company. And I get 30% of all of her profits that come in. And I make money by giving her money in the first place. That's the basic idea of investment. Well, there's two major ways that investments are sold. They're sold as stocks and as bonds. How many have heard those terms before? Maybe you heard about the stock market and seen stuff like that on the news, maybe seen the little red and green lines going up and down. You're like, what in the world is that all about? I'm not going to go into great depth with you, but I do want you to have a little bit of an understanding of how stocks and bonds work. So today we're going to talk about the stock market. First, some terms you need to know. A stock is sold as a share of stock. It says companies will sell shares of stock to investors as a way of raising money. And you see that word capital? That means money that a company needs to do business. Okay, so Luciana can't make Buzzy Bees if she doesn't have money to buy the stuff, right? She needs to buy the equipment. She needs to buy the materials. She needs to buy people who know how to make Buzzy Bees. Okay, it's pay people, not buy people, but pay people who know how to make Buzzy Bees, right? And so she's paying all this money, and it takes money. So she has to have capital, money, to invest in this stuff so she can start her business. Well, she may not actually have money. She needs to raise money. How does she raise money? She sells part of her company. And those are called shares of stock. And this funds her expansion, product, business expenses, that kind of thing. In exchange, notice this and mark this with a highlighter or a big star and underline it. The stockholder becomes an owner of a part of the company. A stockholder becomes an owner of a part of a company. When a person buys stock, they are becoming a part owner, which means if the business does well, they make money. If the business does poorly, they could potentially end up losing some money. In some instances, they have a say in what goes on. They have a say in what decisions are made in the business if they own enough shares of stock. Okay, so look at this. If a company sells 100,000 shares of stock, that's potentially 100,000 owners, and a particular investor buys 10,000 shares, well, that's a tenth of all the shares that were sold, right? Then he becomes owner of 1/10 then of that company. He owns that portion. Now, obviously, the main stockholders are going to be the people who start the company in most instances, but you could become a part owner. As a part owner, he may get to vote on certain business decisions. Now, if you own one share, do people care what you think if there's 100,000 shares out there? No, they don't care. If you own 10,000 shares, do they care what you think? Oh, yeah. They don't want you to be unhappy. Right? So they're going to very much care what you think. So, the more you own, the more power you have in the company, that kind of thing. More importantly to the investor, though, because they don't really care about the decisions, they want money, right? That's why they invested in the first place. More importantly to the investor, he may get paid dividends as the company makes money every quarter. Now, again, how many months are in a year, class? 12. So a quarter or a fourth of that would be 3 months. Usually every 3 months, every quarter, a company declares if they made money or not. If they didn't make money, dividends might be declared. A stockholder who owns 1/10 of a company would receive 1/10 of the company's declared profits. Okay, so that's the basic idea. There's a lot of technical things where if you wanted to pick it apart, you could, but that's the basic general overview. We're talking to 7th graders here, okay? You buy a share of stock, you buy shares of stock usually. You become, class, a part owner in the company. You might get to vote on decisions that go down, and when the company makes money, when the company has profit, you may receive a piece of that. You might get what's called a dividend. Pay attention with me, Corey? All right. So, how does this all work? Well, to purchase stock, an investor must go through a stock exchange or brokerage firm. Currently, most investors buy and sell stocks through online brokerage firms. How many have seen commercials for things like E-Trade, Charles Schwab? You've seen commercials about buying stocks and trading on the stock market. Most of these are online platforms nowadays. You don't go to a physical person most of the time anymore. You do this online. And the broker may charge a brokerage fee or commission in exchange for services. Mark the term brokerage fee and circle commission next to it. Now, a lot of online firms now, because it's all done electronically, you don't actually have to pay a physical person. So most online firms are commission-free trading. You buy your shares of stock, you don't have to pay any commission anymore. Most of them. Some of them still charge a fee. If you go through an actual person, you would probably pay a fee because they got to make money somehow. But most firms don't charge that commission anymore. That's becoming a little bit outdated. So, how do people really make money? Do they just hold on to their shares of stock and make money as the businesses grow? No. That's not how most people play the game. In addition to making money through quarterly dividends, investors try to make money in the stock market by buying shares of stock in companies that they believe will grow. So Buzzy Bee Corporation is selling shares of stock, and maybe Buzzy Bee says, you know what, Mr. Dasky, I'll give you a share of stock for $10. And I buy $200 worth of shares in Buzzy Bee, so I'm buying 20 shares of stock, $10 a share. Well, let's suppose Buzzy Bees just take off. Everybody's buying Buzzy Bees, and Bryson's like, man, I want to get on this Buzzy Bee action. And Bryson's like, Luciana, how much does it cost me for a share of stock? Well, see, business is doing better now, right? So now she's charging $20 for a share of stock. She's like, I'll sell you a share of stock for $20 a share. And so you're like, I'm all in on that. And then Griffin's like, you know what? I want stock at $20 a share. I'm like, hey, Griffin, bro, I got you. I'll show you my stock at $20 a share. How much did I pay for it? 10. But if I'm selling it to him for 20, do you see I'm making $10 in every share? That's the basic gist of it. You buy stock while it's cheap in a company you say, I think this company's going to do really well. I think it's going to do good and take off. And then as the price just continues to grow, you wait and wait. And when that price gets high enough, then you sell your shares. That makes you money. That's how most people make money. And here's the problem. What if Buzzy Bee doesn't do so hot? And Luciana gets desperate for money. And she's like, I have got to make some money somewhere because the Buzzy Bees just aren't selling like they're supposed to. I'm pouring I'm like paying TikTok influencers to show Buzzy Bees in their little videos. So people will want my Buzzy Bees and they'll ask said influencer, oh, where did you get that adorable Buzzy Bee? I got it from Luciana. Oh, but it's just not working. She's paying all this money to these influencers and it's just not taking off. And she's like, I've got to get more money because if I find the right influencer, I can make it happen, right? But she needs more money. And people like Mr. Nesky loves and believes in her, but like Bryson's a little skeptical. He's not all in on Buzzy Bee, but she's like, Bryson, $5. I'll sell it at $5 a share. Give me a big discount on what I gave Mr. Nadasky. And Bryson's like, all right, I'll buy 10 shares. She now has $50. He's got 10 shares. He's got half as much as I do. I paid 4 times what he paid, but he got them for cheaper. And then Griffin's like, if the price is that low, I might be interested in Buzzy Bee too. And at this point, I might be panicking a little like, shoot, I got to get something back. I'm going to lose all $200 I gave this girl. I'm like, hey, I'll give you my 20 shares for the $5. Okay, so he gives me $100. Well, I just lost $100. But in my mind, it's better than potentially losing 200, right? If you buy and then you have to sell when the price is going down. You've heard of the stock market crash? And we've had recessions throughout our history where the prices of stocks just start to go down, 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 down. And investors, as they see the prices going down, they're like, well, I better sell now before it goes even lower. And they end up taking a loss. Right, so you can gain or lose as you play this game. So it says there, as demand for a company's stock increases, the company will increase the price of a share of stock. Note the term, it's called a quotation or a stock quote. That's what we call the price. So you're going to see that term in these exercises. That's just how much money it costs for a share. Does that make sense? Class, we call the price of a share the quotation or the stock quote. Investors who bought stock at a lower stock quote will sell their shares at the new higher stock quote. The money made by selling shares of stock is something called capital gains. When you buy cheap and sell high, that's called capital gains. If you watch politicians talk, they're talking about capital gains tax rates. That's them taxing people on making money through the stock market. And they're like, hey, it's the rich people who invest in the stock market mostly. We want some money on that. We want to raise capital gains tax. That's what that's talking about. If a company struggles, demand for their stock decreases. And the company will often lower the price to try to attract more investors, lower that quotation. Well, if investors end up selling shares at the new low quote, they'll have what's called a capital loss. A stockholder may own his shares of stock as long as he wants. So you don't have to necessarily sell your stock and buy and sell, or you can just hold on to it. He could wait it out, hoping prices go back up, or he might jump ship, so to speak, and sell for whatever he can to avoid what he may view as catastrophic losses. Now, this risk of loss causes most investors to try to diversify their investments by owning stock in multiple companies. If the only company I own stock in is Buzzy Bee Incorporated, I mean, I really got to hope she does well. But if I own stock in Luciana's company, and I own stock in Bryson's auto shop, and in Jalen's Babysitting Limited, and Joel's, pick something, Joel. Calculator Retail Incorporated, whatever, okay? If I own stock in lots of companies and one does poorly but the others do well, that can still keep me afloat. Does that make sense? So a lot of investors, they won't put all their eggs in one basket. If you ever heard that phrase, they don't invest just in the one company. They'll invest in lots of companies, make sure they've got a little bit of protection in case something goes wrong. So let's work through some problems here. And have your calculators at the ready. Read problem, actually for sake of time, I will read problem number 1. Mr. Billings bought shares of Walmart stock for $164.55. Now, that's the price. We call that the quotation. Notice how the quotation is listed. No dollar signs. Okay, so quotations, that's how you have to know. Quotation means money. Because the actual quote won't have a dollar sign on it because they're lazy. The quotation's 164.55. Does everyone understand that means $164.55? All right, a year later, Walmart stock quote was 182.29. In other words, class, the cost of one share of stock is $182.29. What was the percent of increase? How much did Walmart stock go up? Well, how do we find percent of increase, class? So first we got to find the change. What's the change in the quotation, Bryson?
Oh, 17 or 17.74.
17.74. That's the change in the quote. Then we take the change and we divide it, class, by the original, which was
$164.55.
good. The 164.55 was the quotation. So you divide by that. What is that percent of increase, Bryson?
.11%. Or point.
Well, it comes out as a decimal origin. Read the decimal.
0.107809.
Okay. Now let's make it a percent by going boink boink.
Point 10.8.
Good, 10.8% increase. Everyone see that? All right. As of the time I wrote this, I actually did that research. That was the cost of a share of Walmart stock a year ago from when I wrote it versus the current price was what it was as I wrote it. So those are actual legitimate prices that we would talk about for a share of Walmart stock. Mr. Billings bought 6 shares of Walmart stock at a quotation of 164.55. And he had to pay a brokerage fee of $35. Maybe he had an actual person he went through. How much did he spend on those shares? Well, what do we have to do to find out how much it cost him to buy this stock? What do you think, Michael?
Multiply $164.55 by 6, then add 35.
Good. Multiply the quote, 164.55, times the number of shares, which is 6, and then just tack on a 35 on the end. Just add 35 more to your answer, and that gives you his cost for those shares. How much did he spend, Michael?
$1,022.30.
All right, how many had $1,022.30? Does everyone understand how to find the cost of stock? Now again, if you've gone through an online broker, he might not have had to pay that brokerage fee, but that's just the way it goes in life. Then, while Mr. Billings owned these 6 shares, Walmart declared a quarterly profit, giving shareholders, hold on to your hats now, 57 cents for every share they owned. Now realize, most investors are buying hundreds and thousands of shares. So if you have hundreds of shares, you're making hundreds of dollars probably. You own thousands of shares, you could be making thousands of dollars on this dividend. Okay, he doesn't make that much. He only has, class, how many shares? 6. And every share, he gets to get 57 cents. So how much does he get at the end of that quarter, Jalen? $3.42. That's his dividend. That's his piece of the pie because he owns Walmart stock. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. It's not much, but hey, $3.42, you know, buy you not even a bag of beef jerky. Never mind. All right, number 4. Mr. Billings sold his 6 shares of Walmart stock when the quotation was 171.52. So he didn't hold out for a full year later. But he saw the price go up. He's like, you know what? I'm selling them now. So he sells his 6 shares at 171.52. How much money did he get from the sale of the stock? What do we need to do here, class?
Multiply.
Just multiply. And how much does he get from the sale of the stock here, Luciana?
$1,029.12.
All right, $1,029.12. So remember, he originally paid $1,022.30, right? After factoring the brokerage fee and all that, that's how much he paid. He got back $1,029.12. Does everyone see he made money? Not very much, admittedly, but he also made the dividend, right? So he made this, and he made this after having to shell out $1,022.30. What's his actual profit? What's his net profit from this investment? What's his net profit from the investment? How much does he really make playing the stock market game? And it's not very much, admittedly. Was it worth the risk? One might argue no. One might have argued he should have gone all in and just bought lots of shares, but maybe he didn't have that much money. Bryson? There we go, $10.24. How many had 10.24? We take this plus this. That's how much he made. He got this back when he sold his stock, plus he had made this dividend already, and then we subtract what he spent earlier. And that's how much he really made off of his stock. Does that make sense? That's his profit from the investment. Questions? A little bit of understanding there? Let's keep working. Next page. Small business, Buzzy Bees, sold 400 shares of stock to some investors at a quotation of 30. How much money did the small business make from the sale of the stock? So the business sells 400 shares to investors at a quotation of 30. What does 30 mean, class? $30. That's what a quotation is. It's the price. Well, how much does the business get? Again, the whole reason the business sells stock is to make money. How much money do they end up getting here? Elaine?
12,000.
How'd you get that?
Multiply 400 by 30.
Yeah, just multiply 400 by 30, right? It's $12,000. Y'all got that? 12,000? The business then uses that 12,000 to do what they feel they need to make more money. Does that make sense? And the people are hoping that that quotation goes up because the business starts doing really well. They sunk some money into it. With that money, the business makes improvements. They do cool things. Other people now want to invest, and now the price is 32, 35, 38. And they just keep watching that quote go up. And as the quote goes higher and higher, people are like, okay, now I'm going to sell my shares and get a profit back. Number 7, Bob's Really Great Business. Sold, if you have to name it that, it's not great. But anyway, Bob's Really Great Business sold 50 shares of stock at a quotation of 27.6 to Mr. Loco. He had to pay a brokerage fee of $24. How much did Mr. Loco spend on the stock? Work it at your seats and write down your answer. 50 shares of stock to Mr. Loco. Their quotation was 27.6, considerably cheaper than Walmart, but I mean, you know, Walmart's a national brand. Bob's Really Great Business is just trying to get off the ground. And Corey, how much does Mr. Loco spend on this stock? $1,404. How many had that answer? $1,404. Anyone question on how we got that? All right, we multiply the 50 times the 27.6 and then add on the brokerage fee. Okay? By the way, Bob's Really Great Business doesn't get the $24 brokerage fee. The broker does. Okay, the brokerage firm gets that, but they get the rest of it. They got the $1,380. Okay, so he spends $1,380 on the stock plus a 24 brokerage fee is $1,404 is what he spent. So let's write that number down. Question, Michael?
Yes, sir.
All right. Bob's Really Great Business, surprise, turned out not to be so great. And Mr. Loco decided to sell off his shares of stock, all 50 of them. Unfortunately, that day the quotation was at only 21.35. How much money did Mr. Loco make off the sale of his stock? So he spent this much, and he got back how much when he sold it? How much does he get back when he sells his 50 shares? Jalen?
$10,675.
Say that again?
$10,675.
I think your decimal's in the wrong spot. 50 times 21.35.
Oh, 100. 106.75.
Should be $1,067.50. $1,067.50 is how much he gets back. So, class, He spends how much on these 50 shares?
You want that?
1,404. And when he sells his shares, how much does he get?
$1,067.50.
How'd that work out for him, class? Terrible, yeah. He took a capital loss. How much, number 9, was his capital loss in Bob's Really Great Business? How much was his capital loss in Bob's Really Great Business? Corey?
$336.50.
Yeah, lost $336.50. That stock market venture did not go so well for him. Choose wisely when choosing who to invest in. However, the best return potential is on the little startup businesses. If it takes off, you could have huge returns. You invest in Walmart, I mean, they're already doing so well, their prices are already so high. Yeah, they're going to probably grow, so it's a safe investment, but you're not going to make a lot. You decide to take a shot on Bob's Really Great Business and lost. $336.50. Questions on 7, 8, 9. Does that help you understand how people sometimes lose money in the stock market? All right, number 10. And read this for us, if you would, Jalen.
Last year, George Campbell bought 100 shares of Amazon stock at $102.24 through an online brokerage firm that does not change a fee/commission. Amazon never paid cash dividends to their investors. If he now sells his shares at $159.12, find his capital gains.
All right, so this kind of puts the whole thing through. There's no brokerage fee, but there's also no dividends. Amazon has never paid dividends to their investors. So with Amazon, the only way you make money investing with them is you invest now, you sell later, and you hope they're doing better, which they are doing considerably better 1 year later, aren't they? So this should be easy multiplication. How do we multiply by 100, class?
Add 2 zeros.
Boink, boink. Or add 2 zeros. In this case, it's boink, boink. How much did he pay for his 100 shares, class?
$10,224.
$10,224. How much did he get when he sold his 100 shares a year later?
$15,912.
So how much did he make? What was his capital gains?
$5,688.
How much?
$5,688.
In 1 year, doing nothing, right? However, here's the key. You have to have $10,000 in the first place, right? But $5,000 in a year to do nothing, that's a pretty good return. And that key is invested in the right company there. Do you feel like you understand the stock market a little bit? Not enough to really go into it and start investing now, but you at least kind of understand when they talk about stocks going up and down, that kind of thing. You understand how that's working. All right. We're not going to have homework over the stock market tonight. I'm going to have you go back and continue working on the profit and loss thing. Page 48 in your supplements. Page 48, you're going to do numbers 1 through 15. Page 48, numbers 1 through 15. We'll review over stocks some more tomorrow as well, and then get into bonds, which are a little bit different. All right, have a wonderful rest of your day. You are dismissed.